come up, but I'd like to introduce Manfred and Phyllis Zapka, and let from Great Places and Spaces to talk a little bit more about maybe how we would integrate some of this technology, or what their experience is with integrating this technology and other technologies into keeping our living spaces safe as we go forward.
Well, thank you so much. And let me just share my screen here. So my name is Manfred Zapka, but today actually I will be joined by my business partner and my partner in life, Phyllis. And she will be talking a little bit afterwards about, our company, what we do. Basically, I'm an engineer and a healthy building dog. We are launching a new service, and we have a company which is called Great Places and Spaces, which we formed a couple of years back. And my background is sustainable and healthy building infrastructure. So I worked a lot in making buildings energy efficient. And then a couple of years back, I also focused more on the healthy and comfort of occupants. It is actually who she will be introducing a little bit more afterwards is on the psychological side. That means actually how do people actually react, and what is actually the effect of all these things on the psyche, because they have to work together. The physical and the psychological aspects have to work together in order just to manage the situation. So I will be more talking about the technical stuff, and then Phyllis afterwards comes in and speaks about the more important, which I think. So let me go further. Right now we'll be speaking about healthy and productive, healthy, safe, and productive buildings and workplaces. Again, that's actually the motto of our company. And we think that actually our secret and powerful weapon against COVID-19 is actually a building. It's the built environment, because most of the infections are occurring indoors, and we'll be seeing why that actually happens afterwards. And we also think, although it's a tough situation, there are actually technologies available and solutions, and there's not only a silver bullet, but there's certain areas which are more important than other ones, we think. And so their business and organization have opportunity just to reduce the risk. So let me just jump in. Right now, we've been going through the literature, and you see that Honolulu office market is at a standstill. And here the thing comes in, actually, we have to, how do we react immediately, and what is actually the thing more like more long term. And here we see that, a lot of tenants right now are hesitant. What are they doing? A lot of building owners, they don't know what are we going to do in order to bring people back in. They're losing tenants. We heard that afterwards. Some of them are not able to pay the rent, but some of them will say, hey, how can we make our buildings and spaces more healthy, safe, and productive so that people actually come back? And again, like, we are not concentrating on the public health issue. I mean, Hawaii, actually, there's some other metrics saying that basically we are about the world leaders right now in new infections. That is, how many cases are there per 1 million per 1 million of population? We are around about 200 right now. In comparison, Canada is 30, Germany is 20, Finland is 5. So that actually gives two messages. One is urgency, and one is, yes, there are things we can do in order to bring this threat down. And again, we'll be speaking mostly about the building. So again, like, we think that, and we've been working a long time of, healthy, safe, and productive spaces. And it's again, like, it's not only one component, there are a couple. And we just, point out the major ones: ventilation, bring in fresh outdoor air, light, temperature and humidity. It's important for thermal comfort, also to control things like mold or whatever humidity problems. Sound is an incredibly important thing. Air quality, so that we don't have any things like VOCs, like volatile organic substances there. Biophilia is just very important to bring nature into the indoor spaces, like having plants or whatever. External views, very important. People would like to have the affinity to nature. They want to see it. And also, of course, you have also daylight. And so right now, what does it actually mean? Then because all to do these things, you have to invest. And if you want to invest, then actually you have to see the benefits. And it's kind of funny. We've been talking about this for a long time. Also, say, what is actually, there are certain benefits, and people say, get out of here. Just come back when we have more money or whatever. Right now, the important thing is how do we get the facility running for the next half a year or so. But there are tangible benefits, and these benefits right now we made a short calculation just to show by numbers what we are talking about. Is first of all for the occupants, they should have increased health, quality of life, and an uplifting workplace environment. The second one actually is to the benefits to the organization that lease the space. And we have to be, honest. A lot of times building owners and operators say, hey, that's what you get. Either take it or leave it, So and the organizations also had to put up with that. Said, all right, the places we get is actually what we get. But will be learned actually to the quality of the space will be a competitive advantage in the future. Benefits of the building owner who lease the space is actually that they can right now specifically attract and retain quality tenant, and they avoid the losses of unleased spaces. And what Phyllis will be talking about afterwards is also the new trend of working at home, less demand for spaces. So demand will be going down, so the prices will go up. So it's all interplayed, and then also benefit for the community. We were at a smart city conference, and it was amazing how much the innovation officers were were actually interested in healthy and building places, because they say, hey, if we can attract good companies and workforce, it's also good for the good for our overall health of the community. So let's go right now, because we were discussing with Phyllis, how do we actually best illustrate? Let's go like a typical example of a business as usual, how it actually is from the side of the organization. And here, these are some numbers which are based actually on a really good work from Professor Allen and Malcolm at the University of Harvard. And but we actually have, adjusted it for Hawaii, situation. And typical revenue, like 50 employees, 7 million payroll, about 4 million. The rent here is about $360,000, and on 10,000 square feet of space. Other expenses we took it out of the literature. Comes to about like the net income and the after taxes 1,120,000. So right now, what kind of benefit would a healthy building go? And here you see actually what we came up with. Again, like we adjusted it for Hawaii. A productivity boost from healthy and safe buildings is incredible. The literature goes up. Right now, we assumed a 5%, which is modest. It can actually be together. Specifically, you saw all these different aspects. See, it's just 5% being on the safe side. Gives you a boost of 350. Health boost is if you cut down on absentees, health costs, and so on, a very modest 1.5, can be more. Then actually the rent assessments, the owner said, hey, wait a minute, if I want to make it healthy and whatever, I have to get, return of my investment. If I want to put some bigger investments in there, say, all right, he is actually, or he or she is increasing the rent 20%. So would be another $72,000. Energy might be increasing, because what we have to understand is, in order, for instance, ventilation, which is on the top of the importance, you will use more energy in the short term. In the long term, we can deal with this. But let's say it's also $9,000 in 15% increase. Other expenses, you just to add to the healthy buildings. You see actually when it points out, it will come out that the net net income after tax will be about 1.3 million. So that's actually an increase of 18%. and interesting also increase in taxes, even the community wins. I mean, basically everybody wins here, which is very, very, very unusual, but a very promising situation. So if you go forward, then, just we have to realize that, the cost of doing business typically is like 90% is payroll. That's the value of your employees. That's the value of people they are just dedicating their knowledge and hard work in order to make companies grow. 8% around lease and technology, and 1 or 2% utility. And, here in Hawaii is energy is so important. So when you see, for a company, again, like we were always concentrating on the building side, the companies actually can create a lot of value by increasing their productivity, by cutting down on healthcare cost. So it has been already a mega trend, what we saw actually in the last couple of years, and there you see the projected growth in health itself and productive. So it has already been, sinking in that, we have to make it healthy and productive. So the COVID actually threw some kind of a wrench into the whole thing, but in terms of just accelerating. And it was a trend, but it's accelerated. And you see right now, we saw it in what we were talking, and what the reaction we got is, yeah, well, it's a good idea. So same as at the beginning, they said lead, it's a good idea. But right now, it has changed. If you don't do it, if you don't make your building healthy and safe and productive, you might have to close up. Employees might not come. They might be just going to other companies or other buildings where it's more safe and they perceive, or your customers don't come. So right now, actually, this means actually for the post-COVID place where we have all this pre-COVID feature, they are still there. And we actually, we had some projects here where it actually this thing was substantiated, because still people don't take value of good light, temperature, sound, air quality, and so on. But what comes in addition is like the post-COVID additional feature we have to think about. Means, this one, we have to have ample space between people, expose the risk, the reduction, and controlling the indoor environmental quality, controlling indoor air renewal, and sanitation and cleaning protocol. We just heard a possibility of, just again, like these are all things which have to come together. So right now, when you go through the literature, and we've been in this thing for a while, and it has been shifting. At the beginning was all contact transmission. This means formatize, on surfaces. We just heard that, we actually, I remember at the beginning, about a couple of months back, we just disinfected everything which came in and wiped down, packages or whatever. But things actually have shifted. And say, you're right, surface it's still important to wash hands and be, very, conscientious about, making everything hygienic and so on. But the importance has shifted to airborne transmission. At the beginning was only droplets, it was like, droplets, and therefore actually this 6 foot rule actually came from that. But right now, actually, it's pretty much, recognized in the literature that, the aerosol component is very, very important. And you see this one, you can see it in the literature, again, like it turned around, even CDC turned around, World Health Organization at the beginning said, it's not that important. ASHRAE came out with a very great, a position paper. So right now we can see that actually the aerosol actually is very important. So airborne transmission is important. It's not everything. The other stuff also is important, but it is. And this actually, the very interesting and very great paper came out a couple of days ago here, 25th of August, you see down here, where you see the 6 foot social distancing rule is based on nearly 80-year-old science. And then actually came a paper which was co-authored by MIT and Oxford. They came really, made a great contribution, and I would like to share one slide they gave. And that actually is a little bit busy slide, but it tells a lot of stories. And what it says here on this side, it's mask, yes or no, because virus shedding is important, and we can hold a lot of stuff back with masks. And a lot of people understand it, a lot of people are up in arms to have it, but it is a very good thing to have. The second one here, they said, is the contact time. Is it short or longer? Unfortunately, the paper does not specify what is short, what is long. Probably long is 8 hours to sit in an office. Short is probably like, for 15 minutes or half an hour, something like that. And what we can also see here then on the other side is low occupancy, high occupancy. You see on the right side the bar and indoor, cramped indoor spaces. On the other side, just people spread out, and specifically outdoors. And you see here on the upper one, we have outdoor well ventilated, indoor well ventilated, poorly ventilated. And so this is the parameter. And here the last, I know it's a little bit confusing, but once you actually can read into it, it's really good. Here's something which is really silent, speaking and shouting and singing. When you, for instance, are silent, your virus shedding is very little. Very little comes out. If you put on a mask, it's probably safe to just to sit, next to somebody who's, and especially if you point directly in the other direction. It's not without risk, but you can be much lower. Speaking right now, it's increases. Shouting and sitting, like I'm usually a loud speaker, so actually I should really stand back, is actually can shed the most. And sneezes, of course, and sneezes, for instance, can liberate 40 to 50,000 little droplets. It's insane. So if somebody sneezes, my daughter is a nurse at a couple of months also said, Dad, if somebody sneezes, run the other way. I found it really interesting. But here you can see, the yellow, I mean the green, yellow, and red, and really depending on what you do. So the message is here, yes, you can actually, you can control the risk by doing the things which actually matter the most. The next one is strategies to indoor, COVID airborne transmission exposure risk. And again, like wearing masks should right now be not a new revelation. People should not do it and not defend with guns or so that they don't do it. It really helps everybody. And we also understand that mask wearing actually helps not only us, our health, it actually helps our economy. Increasing ventilation, we have to bring more fresh air in. And important also to control indoor temperature and humidity, because there is it's an optimal range. It's about 40 to 60% relative humidity. Operable windows right now, when we have it, we can use it. Of course, it will conflict with the HVAC. Discharge air, just just renew the air. Just don't recirculate a lot. Just get it out. Important also is dilute the indoor air. That means actually it's not only like the stagnant air is the worst, because the aerosol, differently from droplets fall to the ground very relatively fast, and that's actually what the 6-foot rule was based on. The droplets drop down, but the aerosol actually can stay airborne. Specifically, if there is no drag or whatever, no air movement, aerosol has very little drag, so it will basically stand in place. And the important thing is also to reduce the concentration, because the air is not the same. It's which is called infectious dose. That means you can get only COVID if you have a certain threshold of viruses. It's not like if you get 1 or 2, it has to be a certain. And right now they don't know exactly, but they think it's a couple of hundred to a lower thousand. So, and that actually you have to get that dose over a specific time. Then actually you get infection. If that is not the case, risks are much, much lower. So keeping the air going. Diluting air, we said that already. Avoid stagnant air pockets. It's not only if you, goes in one side, goes out, then what is all the spaces which are a little bit off from the ventilation. And filter out the viruses. We have seen that somebody was saying that also if we have recirculating and we cannot change everything overnight, we actually have to cut down, we have to hold back. So probably bring in bigger, air filters, then disinfect the recirculating air. I'm not an expert in the, shining UV light on surfaces wherever. I think right now there was a discussion. The difference is in UVC, in the air ducts, you can blast these guys. You can really blast, and specifically, that it's held back. Of course, if we are in a room, you cannot blast people. It has health effects. So that's the difference. But again, I'm not an expert in that. So that might be others. And right now, of course, we see a lot of people are in the conservation, energy. We have to conserve energy. We have to bring it down. That's actually what we have. But on the other side, we also have to have healthy and safe buildings. And at the moment, it means actually bringing on more air. And there's something like short term or long term. We know that there's energy efficient technology available, and we've done some really great, great work at the University of Hawaii School of Architecture, also Natural Energy Lab of Hawaii. For a couple of years, technologies are there, but they're just not used, and so we need actually to control the indoor environmental quality. This is right now key. And we have a lot of experts who can do, and it pays very much off in the future. So I will rush through some stuff. A lot of stuff would merit a long discussion, but we have to get to the next one, and this is Phyllis. So I will be controlling the slides. So thank you very much. And right now, Phyllis is on.
Hey, Manfred, before Phyllis jumps in, I'd like to say, number one, I like your presentation. It was very informative. One of the calculations as a business person, and maybe Eugene could even talk about it later, is absenteeism. When your employees are sick, that you mentioned that's a huge piece of your cost of doing business is your personnel, your employees. And when you start having absenteeism at an increased rate because of things like COVID, or just they're sick from being allergic to things in the building, that has a huge impact on your profitability. And so besides the COVID, just having a healthier environment, which is what your company does, has a huge impact on the bottom line. And I think most businesses don't take it as seriously as they should, because it if you could drive your employee costs down, it's not by cutting their salary back, it just maybe by cutting back your workers' comp or or the absenteeism of your employees. So thanks for taking on a really important aspect of this discussion. Now we're ready for Phyllis.
Yeah, thank you so much. Just very shortly, the calculation I did was that sorry, I have to. Sorry about that here. Just, the calculation I presented was for the regular business as usual. Right now, you are absolutely right that, the COVID is totally different, because people will just, they might jump off your space. But the underlying thing is that the healthy and safe space has not been getting the same attention as before. It will be like a competitive advantage. We saw it already before COVID, that the biggest problem is talent retention. And talent, the people who are really very highly talented, they can go somewhere else, and they will go somewhere else, and specifically when people have bigger, demands. But let me just jump over. Phyllis is actually really much better and much more knowledgeable about these things. So Phyllis, please.
Anybody that has questions for either one of us, you can do it as we go through, etc. So if you think of something for Manfred while I'm talking, just please feel free and just interrupt and let me know, okay? So yes, I'm the second half of Great Places and Spaces, and I'm Phyllis Horner. I've lived here for over 30 years. I think Manfred's also lived here for over 30 years. We've known each other maybe for about half that time. And, when I first started working with Manfred on Great Places and Spaces, as he said, I was coming from the human resources, workers' comp, absenteeism, employee engagement, and how to help people feel productive at work and included, and not discriminating against people, et cetera, like that. And I spent really most of my career doing that. And what I realized when talking with him is that many times when I was coaching or dealing with employees and they had productivity problems, the productivity was really not caused by what was inside their brain or their desire to do well. It was caused by external factors. So either their boss would come by and interrupt them while they're in the middle of something and they needed to concentrate, or it was just too cold. I mean, some people in one of the places I work would bring blankets in and wrap it around their shoulders, and the person next to them is fine, but they're like, they can't even focus because they're so darn cold. And if you've ever tried to type with a blanket around your shoulders, then you kind of know what I'm talking about, you know? So the idea is, I realized that we needed to have the complete picture in order to really deal with what is true productivity for the modern era. And that's how we kind of put our heads together and started this firm on top of our other work. The thing that I learned the most is that what I didn't know was hurting people at work. And that was even pre-COVID. And as Manfred said, you know, if you don't have enough natural daylight, it affects your concentration. If you don't have enough temperature control, you're distracted. And now if you're worried about the ventilation in your space, that you're going to get sick at work, which people already used to come to work sick all the time. I don't know if any of you have ever done it, but you know, you have a cold, you go in, and you've been sneezing and coughing all day long, and your boss is like, good team worker, you know, you showed up, you didn't leave us high and dry and stay at home. Well, there are a lot of people now that are worried about that. So what I'm going to talk about is building off what everyone else said. Really, it's that everyone on this call is a leader, and what are some healthy building leadership actions that we could take away and spread through the kind of spheres of influence that we have. That WELL AP logo down there means that I finally passed the exam a couple weeks ago. That says that I understand the technology of building science enough to say, here's how it affects people's productivity and well-being at work. It's a very tough exam, but now I guess I start to learn from Manfred and others who actually have been working with this for a longer time. And I'm really proud that like I go from just the human side of caring about people to now having the statistical knowledge to back that up. So let me start. My main message to you is that, you know, as we've watched this since March, there just seems like more and more that we can't control. Like the bouncing ball recovery that Eugene talked about, and the you know, shutdown, startup, shutdown, and the Chamber of Commerce's members are going crazy, worrying about whether they're going to be in the 90% that make it or in the 10% that don't make it, based on what Eugene was saying, right? So the idea is that even though we can't control a lot, the next slide will show you that what we can do is step up to lead in the moment in a different way than perhaps we've been thinking about, in a bigger way than we may be feeling ready for. And I think, you know, Chris's story about pivoting his business was a really, really powerful one, because it shows how he wanted to help just kill COVID. I love that slogan. We should make a bumper sticker or something, you know? And, you know, the idea of doing something that really is relevant, even though he had to learn a lot, and he had to pivot from his electrical background to go and do that. I just love that story. So what is that story for all of us? Next slide, please. It is that there's all these dominoes out there. And, you know, I think, Eugene, you understand this more than any of the rest of us, but like, as the perceived safety of Hawaii goes down, so go down all these different industries. And then we get all the way down to July, and now we're thinking, oh, should the kids go back to school? Well, geez, you know, another domino there. If the children can't go back to school safely, then what happens to the parents? What happens to the family structure? What happens to a lot of things? And so my message to you guys is, even though I'm preaching to the choir, what you choose to do now, and make it as big as you can, because it makes a huge difference in keeping that last domino up, so nothing really like makes our economy get even worse than it is. The next slide, please. And the message of how is to commit to helping people invest in the safest and healthiest workspaces or buildings that you can. So if you are selling UVC lights, great. If you are a legislator, then helping this to become something that the schools have to do. They have to become safe and healthy for students, even though none of us know all the answers. If you are a landowner or a building owner, sharing information with your lessees about what you're doing for the AC system. Because the bottom line of what we heard this morning so far is it's in the ventilation, it's in the airflow, whether you're indoors or outdoors. When you're indoors, if you don't protect the airflow quality, you know, people can get sick. And if you only do what is mandated, so for example, CDC's rules keep changing, right? We all have suspicions as to why, but they keep going back and forth. Then we also have OSHA. OSHA said they're going to stand on the sidelines about this thing. So basically the safe and health of workers, they have something up on their website, but it is not as progressive as the science around the world will tell you. And then third, ASHRAE. ASHRAE came out with this position paper that Manfred referenced in April, but a lot of times people aren't really ready to adopt something that's more costly before it's proven, right? So the idea then is how do we do what's beyond what is mandated without feeling like we're wasting our money, right? Or that we're telling others to waste their money. And my contention, and you'll see it on the next slide, is basically that if you don't do it, there's going to be problems anyway. And here's the human side of that problem. We believe that every person has the right to a safe and healthy workspace, whether that's at home or whether that's in a co-working space or whether that's in an office. What is a safe and healthy workspace? The building, what does it have, and what does it feel like? Well, basically, if you look at the highlighted things, you're going to see what looks like soft things, like peace of mind, that people come together, they can collaborate, and that they feel safe, that their health is not at risk. And what we've been doing, we pivoted also since COVID. We gave out free assessments to any business or individual professionals that wanted it all the way through, I think, the end of June. And what we were testing was what happens to people who work at home when they have to go back. And you guys may have a story about this. You might have someone in your family that is working at home right now, but they're expected to go back. And what we found, maybe it's different than what your experience is, we're interested later to maybe talk about it because we're always learning, is that like somewhere between 65 and 75% of the people who are working at home don't feel like they're ready to go back. It could be because they've proven they can work at home, they prefer it. It could be because they're worried about the conditions of the building they left. And if you look at like an open office floor plan, what you see is that they have a good reason to be worried about going back unless that furniture is moved around before they come back. And why is that? Because, you know, if you don't have enough physical distance between you and other people for privacy, and if somebody does walk by that you're already annoyed because you're stressed, and they walk by, they just interrupt you, they don't sneeze or anything. Or they walk by you and you look up and they don't have a mask on, but they're like within 6 feet of you. We've all been conditioned since March. Okay, stay home, stay safe, work from home, don't see too many people. When you do, take all these precautions. And now we're going to go back to the office and just trust that our managers and leaders are going to care about us. And I believe they do. But what's the evidence? The evidence is that they've taken the time to protect you before you get there. They've asked you what you need to feel safe. And they've prepared the building in a way where they can communicate to you how the building health is doing every single day that you're there. And then I think you'll feel like you're in a safe and healthy workspace. So the question for Eugene and for anybody else that gets around more than we do is, what percentage of our buildings now would be considered safe enough? So anyway, that's the basic premise of why we need to step up as leaders, is because if we don't, it might just be, oh, well, I can get away with this, or I don't really have the funds, I'm going to hold some of my CARES money and put it on something else later. I believe that getting people safe is the prime thing you should be doing. And even if that means that you have to talk to somebody that runs the air conditioning in your overall building, then that means you have to do that. So next slide, please. So 3 leadership actions. The first one is mindset. As you can kind of tell, we're passionate about this idea. I hope all of you are too. It sounds like everybody on this call definitely is. Investing in safe and healthy workspaces is no longer optional. The other data that we've collected so far, and we're always collecting more, is that 75% of the people want choice of where to work: home, hybrid, or in the office. Some people can't stand it at home. They can hardly wait to get back. That's about, so far, that's about 20-25%. That kind of matches what the mainland is showing for professionals that had the choice to work at home or got thrust into it. And then some have children and they're afraid to go back because they're going to affect their children. They don't know whether they're going to catch something there or be exposed and come back. Or elderly people that are in, and you know, we have multiple generations living together here. That's one of the reasons we love it here. You know, we're different. So 80%, over 80% are worried about COVID infection at the office. And 75% expect a more private space. Now, just to say, I saw the chat come in. These are not huge numbers. It's not 1,000 people yet. But if you can help us, if they go to our website, we're going to keep it free for a while, the MyPQ work at home assessment. So the idea is, what does that mean, more private space? That means that if you had a cubicle that was like a 10 by 15, and now you're doing density studies, you're going to have to almost double the space that people had. That means that some people should work at home. Otherwise, you're going to have crowding, right? It won't work. And then the majority of people are saying, give us a healthy workspace. And you can see across the country, teachers, and here, teachers, nurses, grocery clerks, home care aides. People are not just saying, please, oh, please give us a healthy workspace. They're saying, no, give us a healthy workspace. They're demanding it. So it's up to us as leaders to help that to happen. Next slide, please. So how? Get the data that you need to lead. I believe that none of us know everything. And I believed that before COVID. Right now, I believe that none of us know probably 3/4 of what we need. How do we lead when we don't have all the data? We're kind of used to examining the problem. And Manfred reads the news from all around the world, not just Hawaii, every single morning. And we're collecting the research from all around the world on what are the things that we should know that we don't yet know. There's a lot, you know. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't make it through whatever filters to our inboxes every morning. What do you need to know? You need to know about the HVAC and ventilation and temperature of your space and the ability to improve it, even if you're leasing the space and you're in a 20-story building. Now, we talked to building owners, and we were at NIOP, and we also presented to banks, and we presented to several chambers of commerce, et cetera. And what we find is people say, well, that's fine, Phyllis and Manfred, but I don't control the ventilation and HVAC in my space. And, you know, for a while we were like, oh, geez, how are we going to help people answer that question? And truthfully, guys, today, I think we're in a different space. We're saying, too bad if you don't know, go find out. It's time to go find out. And we'll go with you. We'll go talk to the building owner with you to help figure out, well, okay, if it's right that, I think, who said that there's 30 or 40% of the AC systems, 1/3 of the AC systems in Hawaii had a space where you could actually install UVC near the air filters, right? Was that Chris? I don't know. But the idea is, if that's the case, then there should be upgrades that are possible, you can't just say nothing can be done. And if something is being done, be sure that you know. The second one is know the relevant compliance protocols like CDC, ASHRAE, and if you go to our website, it's nascent, but we're building a research base where we put in links to these different protocols for you. Why do you need to know it? It's because then you know the line between what's mandatory and what we call performance level. And that means that you're actually keeping your tenants from leaving, you're keeping your employees from going elsewhere or getting sick. You are going to be a leader in our community in the pandemic era. That's why you need to know protocols. You need to know, like Manfred showed, the ROI of your investments. What will this really do to absenteeism, like Stan said? What will it do to your workers' comp rate? And I don't know, I guess you guys all know, but the latest that I heard is that the workers' comp can be claimed by a person that gets sick at work, even if it's not the quote unquote fault of the leadership of the company. And it goes differently by each state. So if you think about a workers' comp rate last year before COVID, you can easily imagine that it could be at least double. I'm being conservative in saying that because I don't have the experience to say that any more than that. But I can say, you know, if someone gets sick at work, what are they going to do? They're going to claim workers' comp. And here it gets paid for and other places no. I believe that's a good thing. I think that's social responsibility that we would pay for that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying it's costly. So if you have to spend $100,000 on improving your space, but you're going to save $150,000 on even 3 or 4 lawsuits, workers' comp claims, or increased problems with your absenteeism rates. Like I know HMSA was raising rates for some companies in town 20 or 30% 2 years ago. What do you think is going to happen next? You know. And then you need to know how much planning is enough when you reopen so that you're not just reopening for the day you reopen, but for the 6 months after that. That means you need a plan. And then the final one is really, and I left it in white, and that is how do you lead a hybrid workforce? There's a lot of consultants out there teaching this stuff, but the data of what is best practice on that, it keeps changing because the reality keeps changing. So these are the 6 areas that we think each leader needs to invest in themselves to really, you know, step into the moment and lead in a new way. Next slide, please. The third action is linked to that last slide where I said, you know, don't just do what's necessary. It's go beyond what you think is needed. And these 3 icons are just placeholders for a subset of things that is going beyond what you think is needed. And the first one is transparency. Dashboards, metrics, emails, telling your people what's going on before they come back, why they have to come back, what do they want, 2-way communication. And then how is the building health doing? Like, you know, those big signs that used to say 120 safe days without an accident. You ever seen one of those, right? We need that for this. We need more metrics than just one, but we need that for this so that people don't feel like they're stressed beyond the stretching point every time they walk in your door. Trust your people to be able to work at home. Trust them if they say they're stressed. Trust that they care about the business. What I'm saying here is that a lot of managers that we give the results to and say, hey, you know, over half your people want to work at home. The first answer is, well, that's too bad. I need them all back here. Okay, tell me the answer to why would they say that right now? Why would they say that?
This is Stan, I can tell you one reason is because a lot of times it's if I do it for you, I have to do it for everybody, or if I don't do it for you, then I can't do it for everybody. You know?
Exactly right, exactly. And I believe there's a lot of latent mistrust that if you don't see the person working, they're not. Even though knowledge age is almost over, we're getting into the next age. The idea they didn't come up that way themselves. And so if they lose control and then their boss is going to hold them accountable for the work of a person they can't see, and then they won't have anything to say, like, well, how did you manage them? Well, I don't know. I mean, like, they weren't here. So it's a fear thing. Yeah, so that has to be worked on. That is not a new problem. I've been working on that one for a long time with managers, and some are really, really leading the pack. Now that we know that over 40% of America had to be suddenly remote, and it pretty much worked, there's no logic left to that worry. It's only if you had 3% of people that didn't do work before, you should never have hired them, or you should put them on a performance plan. But if not, the other 97% should be given choice, especially since you probably don't have enough room for all of them at once. I'm at 17 minutes, so I'm going to end right in 1 more minute. And then third is expanding the idea of what is an accommodation. So if I go back to work and I say, hey, it's I feel vulnerable. Can I work at home 2 days a week so that I can make sure that my elderly parent doesn't catch COVID? Mine did, by the way. My father, he's in Maryland and he just got it, and luckily he's likely to be fine. But it's a scary moment when that happens, and you wonder. And my brother and sister who live near him were like, "What did we do to him? Oh my God, we tried to take such good care of him, and we kept him away from everybody. I mean, what did we do wrong? Did we, that time I went to see my friend and I took my mask off for 5 seconds. Did I give it to our dad? That guilt is terrible. So the idea of an accommodation being for the person has to be blown up. So that's why I say go beyond. It's the accommodation is for the community. We have to care about each other the way we say we do here in Hawaii. We need to be able to say, if you need it and I trust you, then you have it. It's not just the person's problem when there's a building issue. And that was always true, but that's not the way we treated people. So those are our thoughts. Mike, when he talked to us about our presentation today, he said, just be straight, be honest, and that's what we're doing. So we don't know everything. We could be wrong. Some of these things might not be as worrisome later as possible as they feel to us right now. We owe that to you guys to say, but we do our research, our homework. So proud to be here today and be part of this, Manfred. We have an opportunity for anyone that you know that's in business, and it's a free opportunity because we're beta testing a new service that we call Healthy Building Doc. And you see on the right what it is we don't have an app, so that looks better than it is. But what we will do is, if you have a problem or you know of a building owner that wants to connect with us, the first 5 that do, if they have an issue with what's going on with their ventilation, their air quality, they're not sure that they're really protecting their employees yet when they come back, we will go and answer those questions after an intake that makes sure that we're the right people for them. If not, we'll refer them to someone else. And if they are the right people, we'll give them 2 hours of free consulting on any of these types of issues on the right. Thank you. If you know of anybody, just email Manfred at greatplacesandspaces.com. And we consider this our next gift to the community after the other things that we've given for free this year. So thank you.
Thanks, Phyllis, and Manfred, and Christopher, and Chris, and Eugene. I wish Derek had been here to give his presentation. That the controls piece, as somebody who's been doing some construction lately, the controls piece in big buildings is kind of like the hub of getting those landlords and building owners to implement, especially some of the HVAC issues. They would play a huge role in it. So I think some of the things that Michael wanted us to look at were like, being that tourism is such a huge part of our economy, how do we make our buildings, our hotels and restaurants in particular, safe enough to attract tourists back into our economy and make them feel comfortable, and feel like they want to be there, because, our employees have the vote with their feet, but so do our tourists have the vote with their feet, and they won't necessarily come back and build our economy back if they're not comfortable, as Phyllis points out. So I think it's important that our hotel industry, like Susie said, gets back engaged, and we make those buildings safe enough to make the tourists feel comfortable coming back. On the policy side, I think our state government needs to take the same kind of attitude and leadership role in making sure that people are comfortable in their buildings as employees, and comfortable as tourists coming back to our hotels and our restaurants and things. I think important in Phyllis's presentation is, change is never easy. I always like to say the only human being that really likes change is a wet baby. That most of the time people resist change to the maximum extent. And in business, it's like, well, how does it affect my bottom line? And I'm convinced that you can't always wait for government to do a policy change, but you have to be able to convince investors and business owners that it makes fiscal sense, economic sense to do something. And I think that Manfred's pointing out that the bottom line, your return on investment, it focuses in a great degree on your employees and your big cost of doing business. The folks that you have doing your outreach, doing your production, doing everything, and that's a good place to invest. And safely having safe environments for your employees and your tourists is a huge piece of your profit. And if you don't pay attention to it, or you blow it off because you think it's not important, I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of folks make. So I'm going to turn it back over to Michael right now, just to kind of wrap us up. But I'd like to thank all of the presenters and all the folks that participated on the receiving end. I hope that they got something out of it. They got some ideas. I had a couple folks mention they would like to get the PowerPoint presentation, the presentation. So if you can make those available to Michael Markrich, then he could distribute them. If people have a request for it, they can communicate with Michael through the Renew Rebuild website, and we can get those presentations out. But thanks for participating, and I'm going to turn it back over to Michael to close things out.
Yeah, well, thank you, Stan. That's a great overview. I wanted to ask this question to Manfred and Phyllis, and it was like, how do you bring all this air into the buildings? And this is a totally new dynamic because the buildings are closed. So how do you do this? I mean, and then the other question I had was, you have talked about doing an assessment of buildings which are safe or unsafe. What are the metrics you would use for doing that survey? Does a survey form exist which has all those things? And the third thing is, we have a situation where we have a housing shortage, and a small percentage of our population comes from Pacific Islands, but they represent a large percentage of our cases, and they live in very close proximity in substandard housing. How can we deal with issues of people living together in such close quarters? That's how would you approach any of those issues?
Well, there are a lot of questions, Michael, right? So I think one of the issues is like 15 or 20 years back, I went through the literature. People pointed out, hey, if we really make the buildings very energy efficient and tighten it up, guys will have a problem. I mean, these guys already were saying, hey, we have to make sure that we have the older houses were like, they were leaking, just all stuff came in. And I mean, we went through it, and you see like the air exchange rate went down, just in order to really conserve energy, which is absolutely important that we conserve energy. But on the other side, also right now, we have certain possibilities of solutions. One, for instance, is like the energy recovery ventilation. It should be there. I mean, the thing is like that we just, air condition the space, make it very cold and dehumidifying, and then we blast it out. I mean, this is a very, very valuable resource we can use in order to pre-cool and to pre-dehumidify. Yeah. Then actually what we also did is like the AC system, which we use right now, in a sense, it's 100 years old, the technology. It's like, the old air. And the big problem over there, you have 3 different functions to optimize. One is temperature, one is humidity, and one is ventilation. And it's just superhuman. You cannot do it. So actually, but there are technologies, for instance, and they're coming up and becoming more that you separate, like the temperature control from humidity control. And then you also afterwards have a possibility to separate the ventilation. Can this be done immediately? The stock of HVAC is huge. So, but in the future, when we invest into something new, we should maybe do something, where we can do both. We can make it more healthy and at the same time more energy efficient. So in the short time, we might actually have to bring in more air. We have to, if you have to recirculate, we have to make sure that we recirculate all kinds of stuff. We have to dilute. So there are a lot of technologies when we can go on forever or a couple of hours. There are possibilities, Michael, to make it more healthy. And again, like right now, we see actually that in terms of oops, sorry. In terms of making, sense of, to convince building owners, like if you don't do it in the future, you might not have tenants, because the companies might be in the driver's seat. And you see actually what kind of amazing ROI sense it makes in order to ask to compel the building owner, you have to do something more. And the building owner have to invest, and they have to be paid more, because they also are in the business of making money, right? And the third one is, how do we do right now with the building stuff? That's a very, very difficult. We actually mostly speak about with communities. We know that like 10 people in a 2-bedroom apartment is what it should not be, and so for them, for instance, they are used to open the windows on all kinds of stuff. And we have to see where the infection transmission happened most. It was actually an investigation that at home it's not that, it's not the most critical. It's like between 15 and 20%, of households who have COVID cases do infect other people. So it's not the huge thing. So just it's a long answer to your question. There's a lot of aspects, and we just have to put our heads together, like Phyllis was saying, and we can solve it.